Hey everyone, Physical Media 3 here, and today I'm talking about Sonic the Hedgehog 2. In 1990, Mark Cerny, who previously worked at Atari, founded a new American branch of Sega, Sega Technical Institute, after returning to the United States from living in Japan. After many developers left Sega of Japan, including Yuji Naka, Mark convinced them to join the new American branch. Soon after, work on an ambitious sequel to the first Sonic game began. However, Mark Cerny's well-intentioned plan of an American branch went sour as cultural differences between American and Japanese employees would sour the whole production, on top of the game having less than a year to develop due to Sega's inability to make up their minds, and a bunch of content had to be scrapped, such as a hidden palace zone. Despite the horrible development, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was released in the US on Tuesday, November 24, 1992, referred to as Sonic Tuesday, to an even better reception than the first game. If Sonic 1 helped establish a character, then Sonic 2 helped establish a franchise and a company, proving that Nintendo wasn't the only company that could make games, and that companies like Sega could give them a run for their coins. Naturally, just like its predecessor, it's been ported to all sorts of collections, and hasn't been notably butchered like before. If my memory serves me correctly, I think I actually downloaded this game on the Wii's Virtual Console before downloading the first game, and I would eventually download both games on my Android phone, and actually complete them. Now, those same versions I beat years ago will be what I review in Origins. On West Side Island, a little fox named Miles Prower, often going by the nickname Tails, is frequently bullied for his two tails. However, upon meeting Sonic, he immediately gains respect for him, and Sonic allows him to tag along. Compared to Amy in Sonic CD, I'd say Tails is a more interesting character with a very sympathetic backstory, and a pretty heartwarming friendship with Sonic. While he's pretty useless in the original Genesis version, I'll get to that later. I'll stop talking. His story is still pretty compelling, and it pays off at the end. However, Eggman has returned and built a new space station called the Death Egg, a space station with enough capacity to annihilate an entire planet. Sorry, wrong franchise. I have no idea what this massive space station is for, other than being a base for Eggman meant to feed into his massive ego. Sonic and Tails journey across West Side Island to free the animals from Eggman's contraptions, which is a pretty nice detail in the games that the magnets don't just disappear, the animals inside get released. While the story is nothing to write home about, I do think it's an improvement over the first game, with more interesting set pieces and the addition of brief cinematics to convey the story better. Complementing the improved story presentation is a visually appealing game compared to the first. The colors look brighter and more diverse, the zones feel more unique, the enemy design seems a little more creative, and Sonic has some new animations that feel more expressive than before. Also helping the better story is some truly wonderful music. This was Masato Kanamura's last Sonic game he composed, and damn did he go out on a high note. While a few cues are reused from the first game, the new tracks, although perhaps not as memorable, are high energy and fitting with the game's sense of speed. Speaking of, the gameplay has seen some notable changes since last time, though whether it's for the better or not is debatable. The first thing to note is that the speed cap from the original version of the first game was removed, allowing Sonic to reach much higher speeds than he could before, to the point where, in some instances, you can actually outrun the camera. In addition, Sonic has a new move called the Spin Dash, where holding down and tapping the jump button gives him a quick burst of speed. This helps put a new spin on Sonic's gameplay style, though nothing requires you to use it. And once again, just like in Sonic CD, I would have preferred if it had its own button, without the need to crouch since it becomes a pace breaker. However, it is beneficial for getting up slopes and hills. Now, all these changes can be very exhilarating to watch, but it also makes it feel a bit more automated at times, as if you have less control over Sonic's speed. Not to mention, it can also be quite easy to run into enemies and stage hazards, especially in the original 4x3 version. It also makes it harder to explore and discover the game's method of accessing special stages. In this game, rather than jump into a giant ring at the end of the stage, you look for checkpoints all around the stage, which does give you more chances to succeed compared to Sonic 1 and CD, so at least that's an improvement. You need at least 50 rings before activating the checkpoint, otherwise nothing happens. And if you wait too long, or off-screen the checkpoint, which is quite easy to do sometimes, the sparkly ring that appears above the checkpoint will disappear, leaving the player to have to find another checkpoint. The checkpoint placement is pretty inconsistent as well. While some checkpoints are hidden in pretty well thought out spots that encourage exploration, others feel like they were just randomly placed, making it easier to miss a chance for the special stage. Should you make it into the special stage, you're greeted with one of the most divisive aspects of the Sonic franchise, the half-pipe. And for good reason. Sonic and Tails run along a set path collecting enough rings to pass 3 sections while making sure to avoid bombs that can cause them to lose rings. If you don't have enough rings by a certain checkpoint, you're kicked out of the stage, requiring you to find another checkpoint or use a coin in the Origins release. And if you reach the Emerald without enough rings, the stage kicks you out, with the Emerald floating away in the remaster, making you wonder what's keeping Sonic from just running faster and grabbing the Emerald. The design is hampered by the limitations of the Genesis, where, while impressive, it is very hard to see what is up ahead, making it very easy to slam into objects unless you memorize the entire stage layout. This is why I'd recommend sticking to the remaster if you're going to try to get the Emerald. Not only does the widescreen aspect ratio make it easier to prepare for oncoming stage hazards, making it easier to hold onto your rings, but the stage is remastered with a much smoother moving maze and better draw distance, making it easier to see what's up ahead. Although the fact that it twists up and down it makes it still somewhat hard to see stage hazards at times. And you'd think that bringing along Tails would make things easier, right? Especially since having 2 characters could make it easier to get the rings you need, right? Oh boy. First off, the ring requirement is raised, so that's fucking fantastic. Secondly, Tails' AI is horrendous. He copies your moves a few seconds after Sonic does them, meaning if you jumped just before a stage hazard, chances are Tails will be hit by them. If you're going to do these stages, do them with Sonic alone, or at the very least, get a second player to control Tails. They might have to memorize the stage layout as well, but at least Tails won't be hampering your chances to get the emeralds to such a frustrating extent. Luckily, even outside the special stages, the second player can control Tails. And I'm not just talking about the multiplayer mode where you 2 race each other through 4 of the game's stages with pretty nice original music. I'm talking about plugging in a second controller to control Tails. This is a good way to make Tails somewhat useful, as otherwise he doesn't really contribute much to the game as he just follows Sonic around and can even get in the way of getting hits. He does become more useful towards the end game, but that's about it. With the second player attached, he's just a Sonic clone. In the remaster, Tails' moves from the later games were added with his ability to fly and being able to carry Sonic, making it easier to find hidden secrets and checkpoints. However, none of the versions give him what Sonic gets from collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds. In addition to getting the good ending, Sonic transforms into a golden hedgehog, Super Sonic, a combination of the speed shoes and invincibility powers that makes it really fun to blast through the stages, though watch out, you can still get crushed and it's pretty impractical to use on platforms. Also, the music that plays can get pretty annoying when played all the time. Sadly, if you so much as jump in the original Genesis version, you automatically transform even if you didn't want to. Again, this is why the game should have utilized the 3 buttons, especially since the C button could have been used to not only turn on Super Sonic, but also de-transform him as well. The Origins release fixes this somewhat by requiring a second button to be pressed, though you still can't de-transform him. Seriously, Sega? You got it right with Sonic Lost World in 2013. This could become a staple of the franchise afterwards. Anyways, Super Sonic does make it pretty fun to blast through the zones. Emerald Hill Zone is basically Green Hill Zone with corkscrews, which are fun to speed through. Chemical Plant Zone does have a pretty interesting aesthetic to it, which I guess is why it's the second most reused zone in history apart from Green Hill Zone. The pipes are pretty fun to speed down, and the speed boosters that this game introduced to the franchise are a pretty fun gimmick unique to the zone, though they do become overused in later games. The Aquatic Ruin Zone is a water level just like Labyrinth Zone. Unlike Labyrinth Zone, however, the water is completely avoidable as long as you take the higher path, making the slower water section seem more like a punishment, making it a lot better than before. Casino Night Zone has an interesting gimmick with the slot machines, where Sonic can gamble for more or fewer rings, depending on what combination is made. Fun fact, canonically Sonic and Tails are 15 and 8 respectively, which makes me wonder if they're on the run from the police for underage gambling. Apart from that, not much to the stage besides the launching springs and slow-moving elevators. Hilltop Zone is a decent, if rather forgettable zone with a neat gimmick of having to use the scales to jump high enough. Mystic Cave Zone is a fun zone with some nice back and forth movement. It also contains the entrance to an unlockable zone in the remaster. In the original, it was just a bed of spikes. In the remaster, Sonic falls down into a new zone, Hidden Palace Zone. No, not the one on Angel Island. Taxman has still finished it as a special zone, complete with an all-new boss fight. The boss fights in this game are about on the same level as Sonic 1, with some decent challenge and nice variety. Oil Ocean Zone is a fun stage to speed through, though bad to explore for checkpoints. Metropolis Zone is an oddball among the zones. While the other zones have 2 full acts with a boss fight at the end of the second zone, which is shorter than Sonic 1 or CD, Metropolis has 3 full acts, though apart from that, they're not too difficult unless you fall off the gears and you have to go off-screen them to get them to respawn. And the trio of backnicks can be pretty annoying to deal with, especially the infamous slicers. The next 2 zones are 1-act zones that debatably probably could have been 2 acts of the same zone. Sky Chase Zone is the first plane level of the franchise where Sonic flies on his tornado plane, now piloted by Tails, and jumps on enemies with some of the most inappropriate music for an endgame zone. Wake Fortress Zone starts off with Sonic's plane being shot down and Sonic running through the fortress on his own. It's a pretty chilling final stage though, make sure not to press anything while on these launch pads. Fun fact, if you pass through these propellers you can actually skip a good chunk of the level, though if you die you get sent back to the beginning of the level, so watch out. After Sonic bests one of Eggman's final contraptions, Eggman flees into a rocket and flies off into space. Sonic misses it and Tails flies up and gives Sonic a lift onto there. Sonic arrives on board the Death Egg, which is just 2 hallways and 2 rooms. A little disappointing for something that actually didn't receive any build-up within the game itself. Shows that even with better storytelling, it wasn't quite perfected yet. Once in, Sonic fights 2 bosses. The first is Silver Sonic, which technically was made after Metal Sonic in CD, which really makes me wonder what Eggman was thinking, making something so much weaker, though it is a decently challenging boss fight. Then again, maybe Eggman saved his effort for the final boss. After Eggman runs down another hallway with Sonic giving chase, never thinking to just run faster and tackle him, he activates another frequently reused aspect in the franchise, the Death Egg robot. To beat this giant monstrosity, you've got to wait for the robot to jump up and land on the ground where its weak point will be exposed. Don't try to jump against it otherwise or you'll risk dying, and if you do, you gotta refight Silver Sonic all over again, which is really the only issue I have with the boss fight. You couldn't think to put a checkpoint in between bosses. I can understand doing both bosses again if you get a game over, but having to do it after just losing a life seems too cruel. After Sonic hits it 12 times, the space station's engines start to fail as Sonic runs off the base. Meanwhile, on the ground, Tails, noticing the action from afar and knowing that Sonic is likely in danger, takes the newly repaired tornado and flies off to where Sonic is falling and manages to catch him in the bad ending, cementing their friendship. This is so much better than the good ending where instead Super Sonic flies down to Mobius and flies alongside Tails, since it diminishes Tails' impact on the ending here. The bad ending is one of my favorite endings in all of the Sonic franchise, especially with the heartwarming music, which is frankly one of my favorite pieces in all of the Sonic franchise. Overall, Sonic 2 is a pretty nice game. The graphics and storytelling are improved from the first game, the music and boss fights are quite nice, and the game overall is quite exhilarating. But is it better than Sonic 1 or CD? I'm not quite sure about that since the special stage design is awful, it's quite easy to run into stage hazards, Super Sonic can get annoying after a while, the stages feel like they blend with each other sometimes. I'd say for your first playthrough at least, stick with the Origins release since it looks and sounds the best, the widescreen display makes it easier to see what's up ahead of you, you save your progress without any fear of game overs, the special stage design is significantly improved with it being easier to retry, there are more playable characters, they're being easier to pick them, and Super Sonic is made more optional. Either way, I'd say you can get a fun experience overall. Well everyone, tune in next time for the finale of the classic Sonic Marathon, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles. I hope to get it out by the end of the summer, but who knows. Otherwise it might not be until Christmas. Either way, later!